I don't know if you've ever had this sense that like, something is not right. Something's off. This is not who you were destined to be. You haven't stepped into the light that actually gives you life. You don't feel awake. You don't feel alert. You don't feel properly engaged with life. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've got one goal that I'm aiming to accomplish by the end of this video today. And this is my single promise to you that by the conclusion of this video, I will have, to the best of my ability, have articulated the rationale for why I don't consume the carnivore diet and why I don't think you should either. This is not an effort to convince you what you should do with your life, but rather just laying out my logic, just in the hopes that that resonates with you. I've included some general objectives here and an overview of what you can expect in this video. And for the uninitiated, I will just briefly be describing what the carnivore diet is, what it is not, before segueing into some of the highlights of it, of which there are 5 major ones that I want to touch on, followed by 4 considerable drawbacks in my estimation that I would be remiss to omit. And then lastly, I want to be, in somewhat of an arbitrary sense, assigning different levels from 1 to 100 of a number of different diets that I'm sure you've heard of by now. And then I want to talk about what I feel constitutes level 100 nutrition if you want to play at that level. So if you're new to my channel and you've never seen my face before, my name is Jason and my background is in healthcare. Throughout my 20s, I was a consultant pharmacist circulating the state of Maine and just crossing the T's and dotting the I's at a number of different aged care facilities, nursing homes. My real passion is personal development and giving you the same unfair advantage that I was given in 2015. The information that I used to reverse this apparently incurable disease called eosinophilic esophagitis. The information that I used to get out of my head, become confident, grounded, stoic, at ease with myself, and more effective in this life. I'm really happy to have you here. And with that said, let's segue into what constitutes the carnivore diet. And effectively, some people will oversimplify it to just eat meat. So this diet is downstream of a 2019 publication by Sean Baker titled The Carnivore Diet. And effectively, it's the omission of plant-derived foods. There's no seeds, beans, nuts, legumes. You can see here, no fruits, vegetables, or grains. It's really just the emphasis of meat and animal products. So as depicted in this graphic here, we've got red meat at the center. We've got some eggs. We've got fish. It looks to be, I believe that's bone broth. And sometimes low lactose dairy products will be deemed acceptable. So I'm assuming that's some type of yogurt as well. As with any diet, invariably, there are a number of different variations, spin-offs that have permeated since this book was published in 2019. I figured I would just show you some familiar faces here. We've got Sean Baker, the aforementioned author of that 2019 publication, Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela here, really 2 big movers and shakers in terms of bringing this diet to the mainstream, just having popularized it and allowed it to see the light of day. We've got Bart Kay, Ken Berry, Anthony Chafee, a more recent introduction to the scene, Hamza, a big personal development guy, and then we've got Tristan Lee here as well, who I believe now consumes upwards of 500 grams of carbohydrates per day just because he was hitting a wall with his training and hypertrophy aesthetic endeavors. Now let's delve into the number 1 headline take-home message of the carnivore diet, which is that it is devoid of seed oils. These are public enemy number 1. These refined, bleached, and deodorized oils that are truly wreaking havoc on human health. The totality of the impact and consequences that they've rendered will, quite frankly, likely take decades to develop a full appreciation of. The fact that this diet is low in polyunsaturated fatty acids and rich in saturated and monounsaturated fats is, in my estimation, the most compelling aspect of it, followed by the second most compelling, which oftentimes gets conflated with the fact that it's a low carbohydrate diet. The nuance here that needs to be discerned is the fact that it is a no sugar diet. You've got 0 fructose in this diet. And the positive metabolic impact of that is immense, not least less triglyceride formation, less very low density lipoprotein, VLDL. That's a type of lipoprotein that just happens to be very, very prone to oxidation and hence is highly correlative with the development of atherosclerosis and by extension, heart disease. So the most two compelling aspects of this diet, which make it incredible on the surface, is the fact that it is devoid of seed oils and sugar. And those are the first two things that I would recommend anybody omit from their diet if they're really serious about maximizing their cognition, vitality, and frankly, every aspect of their waking and sleeping existence. The third benefit, in my estimation, is the paucity of anti-nutrients by way of minimizing not least phytic acid, the most potent of these anti-nutrients, in concert with saponins, tannins, lectins, and protease inhibitors. By not consuming a lot of these plant defense chemicals, what you're doing is you are increasing your net profit. You're increasing the micronutrient availability, the amount that is actually bioavailable, that you can actually absorb and utilize in your body. The fourth pro, in my estimation, couples really well with the fact that it's low in anti-nutrients. It's the fact that it's actually very micronutrient dense, especially if it's centered around beef, around red meat in general, which is going to have a host of bioavailable micronutrients that you see depicted here, not least bioavailable heme iron, zinc, very integral to steroidogenesis. You're going to have a whole host of B vitamins. It's honestly going to be the best way to replete, if you are in a micronutrient deficient state, these nutrients. For example, if you're a little bit low in vitamin B12, for example, you've been on a plant-based diet for a while and your liver has systematically become depleted in B12, red meat is really going to check not just that box, but all the others that you see here. Now, the fifth major compelling aspect of this diet that I wanted to disseminate is the fact that it's rich in some of the best bioavailable animal-derived proteins. And you can see this chart here, table 1, the digestible, indispensable amino acid scores. And you can see the animal-derived proteins ranking superiorly across the board relative to their plant-based counterparts. And that high protein intake that is part and parcel of a carnivore diet is going to dovetail really, really well with augmenting satiety. You're just going to be satisfied and by extension be less inclined to overeat. Now, that satiety is not merely due to the increased protein consumption of the carnivore diet relative to other diets, but it's also the fact that you don't have seed oils in your diet that would otherwise hijack those same satiety mechanisms. So it's the fact that you're actually eating whole foods that you're going to be more satisfied and just through osmosis, without even thinking about it, eat an appropriate amount of calories to sustain a healthy body composition. Now let's talk about the first major glaring drawback to this diet, in my estimation, which is the paucity of antioxidants. I've included here this graphic of 16, yes, plant-based foods that are all very potent sources of antioxidants. It's my very strong opinion that optimal human nutrition is predicated upon an omnivore approach, and that you just want to handpick the best of the animal-based world and the best of the plant-based world, which, by the way, I do not see depicted here. My personal pick of an antioxidant source that I lean on twice a day, every day, is something that I'll be mentioning at the end of this presentation when we delve into what, in my estimation, level 100 nutrition looks like. And in just a couple of slides, we're actually going to be integrating this idea of insufficient antioxidants, and it's going to segue really nicely with the second con here, which are suboptimal micronutrients. A lot of people that espouse the benefits of this diet, of which there are many spanning far and wide, will talk about the fact that they feel they can get all of the nutrients that they need from merely animal-derived food sources, and that the same is not true of plant-based foods. And on the surface, that's true, at least to sustain life. You can get enough micronutrients to ward off, for example, scurvy. You can get enough vitamin C to do that. But for anyone who's following my content, my lifestyle, I'm talking about how to actually be optimal, not just today or tomorrow, but so that you don't end up in a nursing home, one of the ones that I consulted at, where you end up having drool unbeknownst to you dribbling down your lip and chin. So I want to show you how to actually be physically and cognitively optimized in a way that actually has depth and breadth, in a way that actually will serve you well and afford you great longevity. So vitamin C, calcium, and manganese, at least in my estimation, are going to be the 3 micronutrients of concern in terms of consuming them in an amount that I would consider to be optimal. I would honestly liken manganese to vitamin B12 when comparing a carnivore versus a vegan approach. Both of those approaches, unless they are supplementing with manganese or B12 respectively, will result in the systematic depletion of those nutrients from their bodily stores. So vitamin B12 over time will be depleted by the liver if you are on a vegan diet. And over time, a lot of the manganese stored in your bones is going to be depleted because you're not eating a sufficient amount to replete that and attain a homeostatic environment. Calcium, if you don't have enough dairy products in your carnivore diet, is something that also will leach from your bones. And it may not show up as an issue today or tomorrow, but half a decade, 7, 8 years down the line, you don't want to have your bone mineral density be compromised because you didn't bother, for example, consuming a calcium citrate supplement. So here, as I said, we're going to circle back to this idea of antioxidants and talk about vitamin C and the fact that my goal isn't to have you avoid this, but rather to garner the myriad benefits of vitamin C, approximating this, not least as an antioxidant. And a lot of the proponents of the carnivore diet would point to glutathione and superoxide dismutase, these endogenous antioxidants that we can lean on. But what they don't realize is that vitamin C is actually a cofactor for the synthesis of those endogenous antioxidants. And also the fact that this enzyme here, L-gallanolactone oxidase, is one that our genome no longer codes for because of a DNA mutation that happened millions of years ago. And I would just honestly ask you to consider the fact that human beings used to actually synthesize their own vitamin C. It's something that dogs are still able to do, and they do so at a rate of 18 milligrams per pound of body weight. So if you got a 100-pound dog, they are synthesizing endogenously 1,800 milligrams approximately on average every 24 hours. So to think that the measly 10 milligrams that you're getting from your carnivore diet will suffice may be enough to not end up looking like this, but I wouldn't say it's enough to optimize for your antioxidant capacity. So I would honestly encourage you to explore the possibility of supplementing, even like what I do, 500 milligrams twice a day. So let's delve now into the third major drawback in my estimation, which is the insufficiency of starch. And so again, I feel that we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater by demonizing all carbohydrates, as opposed to realizing that the benefits are largely due to the omission of added sugar consumption, and that if we prioritize for starch over sugar, we can get these benefits that are part and parcel to starch and not sugar. Starch is capable of replenishing muscle glycogen, whereas, for example, fructose is only capable of replenishing liver glycogen. And once that gets topped off, what happens is it increases triglyceride and VLDL formation and is going to have metabolic consequences downstream. The truth is that there has never been and never will be a Tour de France ketogenic winner. And that's because you're not going to have sufficient enough glycogen stores to support that anaerobic demand. And if you're somebody who follows a lifestyle like mine, you're training in the gym, you want a better physique, and frankly, you want to optimize your hormones, I highly recommend including starch. My daily minimum that I recommend for men is 150 grams per day. So now let's delve into con number 4, which has to do with chronic ketosis. Concerns not least depicted by potentially suppressed thyroid activity and a suboptimal endocrine system at large. Testosterone and cortisol act in opposition. These are antagonistic hormones, and low carbohydrate diets tend to lend themselves to cortisol elevations, and that can absolutely put a dampener on your testosterone levels. I've included here a glucose reading from this morning when I was fasted. That's 3.9 millimoles per liter. If you multiply that by 18, that's going to equate to the number of milligrams per deciliter, which you'll be much more familiar with in terms of a glucose reading. So 3.9 times 18, it's going to be about a fasting glucose of 70. And at maintenance calories, I'm consuming over 300 grams of carbohydrates per day. Something that isn't often talked about is that the most insulin sensitive people on the planet actually consume the most carbohydrates, and that by being ketogenic long term, you are actually going to render physiologic insulin resistance. I'm not saying that's pathologic, but what it does do potentially is it actually increases the area under the curve of your glucose. So while my fasting glucose might be 70, I eat a rice containing meal and it shoots up to 130. That peak is transient and it comes back down to a lower basal level, whereas someone who's in a ketogenic state might be at 100 milligrams per deciliter or higher in a fasted state. And that's going to mean that there's more overall glycation and advanced glycation end product formation over the course of a day. So that's just something to consider in concert with these levels here, which, as I admitted, are somewhat arbitrary. This is just what it looks like to me. And again, this is a total straw man of the standard American diet, just really picking out the worst possible aspects of it, just the pizzas, sodas, and so forth of this world, basically a pure sugar bomb. If we use that though as level 1 and rank these 3 other diets relative to that, I think we can gain an appreciation for the fact that carnivore is clearly vastly superior to the standard American diet that I was certainly acclimated to. I'm sure you are no stranger to. If we look at the vegan diet, that is maybe an order of magnitude greater than the standard American diet. Similar to carnivore, it's beneficial because of what it does not have. Not having the sugars, not having the industrial seed oils, being a whole food matrix is going to be vastly superior to the standard American diet, but the vegan diet is going to be devoid of high quality animal protein and micronutrients that the other 2 diets down below offer, such as the Mediterranean diet and the carnivore diet, which some people have dubbed the modified Mediterranean diet. This is kind of an inside thing where, because there's such a negative bias towards red meat, what a lot of people will do when they see their doctor and they say, oh, wow, like, what did you do differently? Right? The doctor is seeing a decrease in their A1C, fasting insulin, if they are enlightened, if you will, enough to have that measured. What a lot of people will come back with is just saying, I'm on a modified Mediterranean diet as opposed to a carnivore diet, which quite frankly could ostensibly elicit a heart attack in a conventionally trained general practitioner, for example. The Mediterranean diet is honestly incredibly healthy, has a ton of redeeming qualities, and I could have just as easily flip-flopped these here, pegging that at level 80 and the carnivore diet at level 70. The reason that I didn't is because it doesn't have, to my liking, enough saturated fat, and because it has potentially too much polyunsaturated fats, but that's greatly attenuated, again, by the antioxidants. So it's a bit of a toss-up what's actually superior without further supplementation to the carnivore diet. Carnivore at level 80 would be if you are supplementing appropriately. Next, I want to talk about level 100 nutrition. This is a work of art. This is bullshit. Let's have a look at the work of art. These are the 9 best superfoods in my estimation. If you make your diet predominantly comprised of these 9 foods, I strongly feel that you cannot go wrong. This is a curated collection of the most micronutrient dense foods that are devoid fundamentally of anti-nutrients. This is an incredible diet that changed my life on every level imaginable. You've got beef, you've got full fat dairy products, eggs, beef liver, basmati rice, pomegranate juice, wild-caught salmon, you've got sweet potatoes, and wild blueberries. You are checking so many boxes with these foods that I hope you ingrain this image in your mind, because this will serve you well as an effective map to navigate the nutritional landmines that are ever present. When you go into a grocery store to procure your local groceries of choice, to procure your food for the next several days or week, just keep this image in mind and ask yourself how you can get more of these foods and less of the hyper-palatable, processed, and packaged foods. This is a diet that really epitomizes, in my estimation, what is going to optimize not just for performance physically and cognitively, but also longevity. So by not omitting carbohydrates, by optimizing for such by way of white rice and or sweet potatoes, you're going to be getting the performance benefits associated with them. You're going to be able to train harder with more volume. You're going to be recovering more effectively from your workouts, and likely you are going to have a superior hormonal profile as well. By not omitting our antioxidants, my favorite being pomegranate juice that I take half a cup of with every single meal, and wild blueberries, we're going to be ensuring that the balance of oxidative stress to our antioxidant capacity is not out of whack. And that's something that I do worry about for people who are not consuming exogenous sources of such. I want to be very clear that this diet at level 100 is in concert with level 100 supplementation, which I see as being vitamin C, E, K2, and magnesium, plus or minus what you see on top, vitamin D3, just depending on the latitude that you happen to live at and the amount of sunlight that you gain exposure to. Now, of course, you could curate a diet and just completely go all the way around the world out of your way to procure vitamin C and E from whole foods, but I actually feel it's better to isolate and spot supplement them amidst these 9 foods, so that you aren't unnecessarily introducing things that you don't want, anti-nutrients. So I strongly feel that the combination of this level 100 nutrition and level 100 supplementation is what's not only going to allow you to check all of the nutritional boxes, but also minimize any potential downsides that would otherwise be part and parcel to the foods that would be necessary to consume to render some of these supplements obsolete. And lastly, for those inclined, we're going to, in spite of this talk, insist on their carnivorous ketogenic ways, I would just offer a few bits of information, which is that firstly, being mindful of the temperature that you cook your meat at. So the carnivore diet is very high in cholesterol, which is potentially problematic if it becomes oxidized before it enters your mouth. No matter how good even your antioxidant capacity is, pre-oxidized cholesterol is actually directly atherogenic, and that can form by way of exposing your cholesterol-containing meat to too great of a temperature. And so instead of charring your meat, I would highly recommend opting for an Instant Pot and cooking at the lowest temperature, lowest pressure setting. Ghee is something that you also need to be very cognizant of, because that can contain what I've seen in the literature, 10% oxysterols, which again are directly atherogenic and unfortunately not often talked about. And that's why I would say that butter is best. So if for whatever reason you do need an oil to cook in, please opt for butter and not ghee. And then lastly, I would just mention, because even I've encountered this, ferritin levels being too high because of the bioavailable heme iron that is part and parcel to the carnivore diet. Just making sure that you're keeping tabs on your ferritin, because that is very pro-oxidative when you do have a great deal of stored iron. So donating blood regularly would be a really effective tactic that would allow you to keep your finger on the pulse of your ferritin levels, allow you to keep consuming this diet long term while keeping your ferritin levels under check. And lastly, I just wanted to plug my website. This is alphaactualization.com. Truly a gift from me to you. This is a reverse engineering by way of streamlined articles dissemination of how I leveled up in this life and just became comfortable in my own skin. I want you to show up and be the person that you were meant to be. I don't know if you've ever had this sense that something is not right. Something's off. This is not who you were destined to be. You haven't stepped into the light that actually gives you life. You don't feel awake. You don't feel alert. You don't feel properly engaged with life. Well, I'm here to tell you that we can put an end to that. You can fix your physiology. You can optimize your endocrinology, and you can gain access to an experience of life that someday, I promise, if you follow along long enough, will bring you to tears of gratitude. That's it for today, my friend. I love you very much. Drop a comment down below. Like and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, until next time, find your freedom. Peace.